Chapter 2. The Appearance of Spiritism. After the accident mentioned, the wheel of time spun unceasingly, until the moment when man had to start learning again, since he had become unconscious due to a spontaneous and uncontrollable planetary accident. From then on, he started to use a defective body. It has followed through the centuries to produce imperfect bodies in the same way. In other words, all the bodies of children who were born from this accident inherited this physical defect. Thus matter in its automatism does not correct its own defects, for such work can only be accomplished by the immortal spirit. This blockage of newborn matters did not allow the reincarnating spirits to remain with their knowledge and memories of when they had no matter. Therefore, with each new reincarnation or exchange of matter, man had, and has, to learn everything again. It is convenient at this point to open a parenthesis to clarify an issue that bothers the human being. It is the reason why he does not remember the facts and events of other lives. The answer is simply one, because he uses a matter with blocks, centered mainly on the brain region, which does not allow him to maintain the knowledge previously acquired. It is not, therefore, a punishment, nor the benefit of oblivion, for it would be better for him to remember everything, including the unpleasant facts, for in this way it would be easier to avoid their repetition. But other intimate questions afflicted man, especially those concerning his origin and his future destiny. In the course of time, many occult, esoteric and religious organizations have sought to provide an answer to this type of inquiry. From that began a process of programming the human being, who in his state of unconsciousness did not have the necessary discernment to know if the answers offered answered the questions asked. Many of the teachings taught by organizations created and still create certain mental cliches, giving rise to new records that once recorded in memory there remain beyond physical life. Many of these new records contributed nothing to the awakening of man, on the contrary, led him to identify more and more with the matter itself, which in short is only a part of him and not totally him. This identity with matter is responsible for most of the suffering that afflicts him. With this identification, the physical body has gone from being a part to being the whole. It ceased to be an instrument to be command. The man when he was conscious had a bridge that connected him directly to the spiritual world. This bridge was destroyed by the accident, and in the times that followed, a wall of untruths was created instead, which prisoned him more and more in the body. Many people do not admit that the physical body is only part of him and not totally him. The human being thus oriented, even after physical death, began to behave according to the teachings received. Many of these organizations taught, and still teach, that spiritual life and reincarnation did not exist and that the return to matter would take place through the very body that would one day rise from the grave and return to life. The man thus programmed refused to wake up after physical death to his new condition of life, not realizing that his state of living being continued. He had only changed from the physical dimension to the spiritual dimension, where his acts were also real and concrete, but belonging to another vibratory frequency. It should be noted at this point that many teachings and harmful events recorded in the matter can only be understood and undone in the matter itself. That is why the natural way to undo these records is reincarnation. It is not a question here about the action of the law of cause and effect, but of creating the same conditions as when the record was effected so that the understanding take place. It is important to note in this explanation the change of language. We are discharacterizing the debt and the rescue and showing the repetition of the experience in the body to seek the understanding. We can call this acquisition of consciousness. Thus, observing man's behavior before and after physical death, leaders of the spiritual world thought it best to come up with a plan that would come at the same time to comfort, guide and raise awareness of human beings belonging to planet Earth. In this way, Spiritism was created, which comfort because it gives the certainty that life continues and that the death of the physical body is only and only an event of life in the body, guidelines because it provides essential teachings for the understanding of life in the material and spiritual worlds, raise awareness because it builds again the bridge that connect men to the spiritual world, leading him to recognize himself immortal and to understand that the body is only part of him and not totally him, and that he has lived before and will live thereafter. Man who had come to live with the facts and memories of material life began to witness and to know the phenomena that demonstrated another reality that was behind the visible world, a reality that even invisible was rich in revealing details capable of challenging the most convinced skeptics and the most advanced intelligences. Thus, in an uninterrupted process, Spiritism has been expanding in cities and countries, trying to realize the awakening of man. From then on, the incarnated human being began to count on the reference of the spiritual world to live their lives. With the spread of Spiritism, man has come into contact with a new world, full of new realities, full of incontestable phenomena, but at the same time inexplicable by scientific knowledge. Spiritual medicine has arisen with cures and surgeries that fulfill two objectives at once, in the foreground attesting to the existence of the spiritual world and its interconnection with the material world, and secondly to bring benefits to the man when ill. Other forms of exchange for the purpose of raising awareness are used, such as psychography, psychophony, materializations, among others, which greatly contribute to improving human understanding. It is important to note at this point that Spiritism arose first by facts and then by doctrine, consolidating itself both by the value of the teachings and by the logical and scientific character of its presuppositions. In Spiritism, everything that is not rational must be put aside, thus showing that every fact or teaching must first be understood and then accepted in our inner world. The greatest difference between Spiritism and other religious groups is the path followed. While many organizations seek the way of faith, Spiritism goes through the path of reason, leading man first to understanding and then to belief. In this way, belief coming from understanding becomes the light of knowledge, while belief, daughter of faith, remains only as belief. In Spiritism there must also be faith, but reason faith, that which must pass through the path of reason. Since it is not so, it is not a Spiritist faith, but simply faith. The man who understands really knows, whereas the man who has faith simply believes.
Related topics. 1. Why does the incarnated spirit lose the remembrance of his past? Spirit's Book. Man cannot, and may not, know everything. God, in his wisdom, has so ordained. Without the veil which hides certain things from his view, man would be dazzled, like one who passes suddenly from darkness to light. Through the forgetfulness of his past, a man is more fully himself. Comment. Man must know everything to be better situated in the great concert of creation. We understand that the Creator in his supreme wisdom must always want the best for his children. If man does not remember his past, his origin and why he occupies a defective physical body here on earth, it is due to an accident and not because the Creator has determined it. This is not an inferiority of the incarnated spirit, but a temporary defect of the physical body. 2. How can a man be responsible for deeds, and atone for faults, of which he has no remembrance? How can he profit by the experience acquired in existences which he has forgotten? We could understand that the tribulations of life might be a lesson for him if he remembered the wrongdoing which has brought them upon him, but if he forgets his former existences, each new existence is, for him, as though it were his first, and thus the work is always to be begun over again. How is this to be reconciled with the justice of God? Spirit's Book. With each new existence a spirit becomes more intelligent, and better able to distinguish between good and evil. Where would be his freedom if he remembered all his past? When a spirit re-enters his primitive life, the spirit life, his whole past unrolls itself before him. He sees the faults which he has committed, and which are the cause of his suffering. Comment. In this particular case we understand that the question should be the answer, for therein lies the truth. We reaffirm that if man does not remember his past, it is of no use to attribute to him punishments whose effect may be revolt by feeling wronged, since he remembers nothing. In this way, to the facts related to the material life itself are being attributed causes located in other past existences. We compare the question to the case of a man to whom a task is assigned. He would have to go a long path full of mountains, valleys, rivers and plains. He would cross the road with so many men and should keep their features, their costumes, and all their physical attributes. On the return of his journey, this man should report everything he saw, even though he had made the journey with his eyes totally blindfolded. 3. Can we obtain any revelations respecting our former existences? Spirit's Book. Not in all cases. There are, however, many who know who they have been and what they have done. If it were permitted to them to speak openly, they would make curious revelations about the past. Comment. Knowing about our previous lives means know who we are. In other words, it means having access to ourselves both in aspects of our present life and in the details of what we have been in other lives. This is achieved by working our brain condition and our overall energy level. 4. Incorporeal existences of a more elevated nature than ours, is the reminiscence of our anterior existences more exact? Spirit's Book. Yes, in proportion as the body is less material, the incarnated spirit in it remembers them more clearly. The remembrance of the past is always clearer in those who inhabit worlds of a higher order. Comment. In worlds where people use perfect physical bodies, without the actual blockages of our bodies, remembering their previous lives is a common fact. In these worlds people do not really die as we understand here, but they change bodies after having used them for many, many centuries. This is not because the world is superior, but because it has not gone through an accident of the proportions of what we have been through. If they went through an uncontrollable accident like this, they could also become unconscious and no longer remember their past lives. The death of our physical bodies by the exhaustion of their vitality is, above all, a curable disease and not a fatality. 5. Why do we not always remember our dreams? Spirit's Book. What you call sleep is only the repose of the body, for the spirit is always in motion. During sleep he recovers a portion of his liberty, and enters into communication with those who are dear to him, either in this world, or in other worlds. Comment. We do not clearly remember all of our so-called dreams because we have our brains seriously impaired, with few energetic impulses, low frequency, and small vibration. At night when we move from our physical bodies we have contacts with other incarnated people or not. We receive information and witness many events. When we return to our bodies the low brain vibration erases all our memories. This sometimes does not occur and we can remember much of what happened. This phenomenon is only possible because of certain peaks of energy in the brain that allow the recording, in the physical body, of events occurring with the person in the extraphysical dimension.